Right, it is 6 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephanie Hall-Furman, and thank you all for joining me on my first podcast on the Empower Her Series, Stories of Resilience, on my Unveiling Truth podcast. And so today I am going to be shining a spotlight on remarkable women who have triumphed over adversity and emerged stronger than ever. So that is the goal or the mission of this podcast. And today I have Dr. Abby Hasberry, and she is, according to her LinkedIn, an angel investor, psychologist, executive educational leadership coach, and licensed marriage and family therapist. And I am extremely excited about this interview because Dr. Abby had helped me early on in my career in founding a school. And so she doesn't know this, but she holds a special place in my heart because she gave me the real and the uncut of what it's like to be in a leadership position and also be in this role as a woman of color. So I am very appreciative of her and her time today. And thank you for wanting to be on my podcast to share your story to empower other women.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Excited.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm going to start off with the first question because I want to respect your time and also want to respect the viewers' time. So I'm going to start with, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I am a transracial adoptee, which I think is important to kind of start my story. And what that means is, as an infant, I was adopted by a white family. So my parents had 3 biological kids and decided to adopt. And so I ended up being raised in a white family. So that's kind of the start of my story. On top of that, my dad was a professor who wanted to teach but not publish. And so when it came down to like tenure and publish or perish, we had to move every 3 to 5 years. So I'm also kind of consider myself a global citizen because we lived all over the place, including 3 years in Miami and 5 years in Miami, 3 years in Egypt, Maryland, just all over the place. I'm also an introvert. So a little bit about my background too is that every time we moved, it was like reinventing myself in like a stressful kind of situation for a kid who never really wanted to put myself out there to begin with. So we moved a lot, and then married my husband who was military and had the same experience of moving all the time. So I've lived all over the place. The mother of 3. On top of being a transracial adoptee, I'm also a birth parent. And so when I was 16, I got pregnant, had a son at 17, and did not have the support that I needed. No one told me how to do this thing. And so also a birth parent. And so I guess that's a lot about my background, also in reunion on all sides of my family, including my son. And so I guess that's where I kind of wanted to think about that story of getting over things. I also am a therapist and have been a founding principal and an educator and all kinds of things over the life of my career.
Awesome. I did not know that about you. I don't know if we ever had that discussion when you first started helping me out. So that's a really cool part of your story, and then kind of how like where you are now. So how if we were to take your background and you being adopted, tell me how that translates into who you are today, the Dr. Abby that we know.
Yeah, it is a lot and probably all of what I am today. Being transracially adopted, growing up in very white spaces, and not often Black people, we as a people, especially as we become professional and high in academics, we are often one of the only Black people in our area, in our, in the room. But what that meant for me is that when I went home, I was also the only Black person there. And so that is a lot of who I am and a lot of kind of how I developed my identity and really sought out Black culture and Black women and really supported Black people as in general, because I didn't have that at all. And it was something that I had to go looking for and make for my own. So that's a huge part of kind of who I am and why I do the things that I do and who I became. It really was a struggle to find my identity.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that makes a lot of sense because you are very helpful. Like because you actually saw me. Yeah, you actually reached out to me when you found out I was going to be founding a school. And so that meant a lot to me because people say that they're here to help but then they don't help. But you came and you said, I'm here to help. And then you actually helped. And so that makes a lot of sense of not to the identity piece, but to like the culture of who you are when you want to help. And so I resonate with that with you, where you are now. So my next question is, what challenges or obstacles have you faced in your life, whether personally, professionally, or otherwise, either tied to being adopted and growing up and finding your identity, or outside of that?
Yeah, so just that identity part was really hard in general, just kind of finding a space to find me, and understanding also how that fit in being in a minoritized situation in a racialized society, growing up in academic environments, growing up in professional environments, just understanding how it feels to be a woman of color in those spaces, and a woman of color in those spaces who doesn't necessarily know how to get support from other women of color, which I definitely felt in the beginning of my career. But also just being in spaces where you aren't expected to be good, strong, smart, fast, whatever it is. Really understanding that, especially coming from the environment of whiteness, where my parents thought, like, as long as you do the X, Y, and Z, you'll be great. And yeah, it wasn't always that way when I wasn't next to them
Correct.
or standing with them. As soon as I got on my own, I realized like people did not have the same expectations that they did. And so navigating that space has been really hard. I think that thinking about kind of how that affected me is that it made me want to be better, stronger, faster, smarter, but it also made me want to reach back and help other people be that way. And that was part of my own healing, is helping back, like reaching back and helping others heal those spaces when I didn't get that help.
That's so powerful and really resonates with me, because that's what I'm doing with this podcast and with my other one, my my first podcast. This is my second, is being in a place of healing after trauma, but not wanting to stay in that place, wanting to help someone else not be in that place, because you personally know what it feels like, and so you don't want someone else to experience the same thing that you experienced, and so that reaching back to help other people. So I definitely resonate with you on that one. Next question: how did you cope with or overcome the challenges outside of just reaching back and helping other people or helping other women?
Yeah, so I have this thing that I call kind of my R3 framework. And so that's reflect, release, and reinvent. And so I really spent a lot of time in reflection and introspection, reflecting on the things that I've been through, how I got through them, releasing the parts of it that don't serve me, because that negativity just doesn't help. You just have to
Yes.
sit in it. Like, you have to feel it
Yeah.
and sit in it to heal it, but you also need to release it at some point and just realize that it doesn't serve you. And then once I go through that process, it's kind of like reinventing me. So I've been through this thing. Now who do I want to be different because of it? And so that's kind of the process that I've been through many, many times, whether it be in professional relationships, in personal relationships, and even just experiencing things, is really thinking about, how did I get here? What did I go through? What a part of this does not ever need to be part of my story again? And then who do I want to be different from that experience?
So I love that, because I'm in that place now, but that wasn't something that like I just automatically knew how to do. I obviously needed therapy for that. I obviously needed to read books. I needed to figure out what my healing process looked like. But how did you get to that point? How did you know that this was the process that you were going to take to heal and move forward? And I'm sure you use this in your other practices as well.
Yeah, I just developed it on my own in a way, just because there have been so many things that I felt, so many negative experiences that I had. And I realized, like, as a parent, as a woman, like, I couldn't sit in those spaces. And so it was just part of my self healing to just sit there and be like, these are things I've been through. This has sucked, but I can't sit here in this experience. And especially in reunion as an adoptee, going through almost like a second rejection from my birth mother when I found her, and her saying, like, I don't want to have anything to do with you, and sitting in those spaces and feeling those kinds of rejections, and being like, this is a them problem, not a me problem. How do I turn this into something that I can live through and be stronger through afterward? I didn't get therapy originally. That wasn't part of my family structure. My parents didn't talk to me about kind of, these are the things that you can do. So it really was
Yeah.
sitting in my own stuff and deciding that I didn't want to be an angry person. I didn't want to be a sad person. So how do I get through this?
That's so powerful. How so so some people watching, and especially women, right, watching, would hear your story and go, there's no way I would be able to come up with that framework to help myself out of this.
Lots of
But
writing, journaling. Yeah.
and that's what I was going to ask, like, for those women who are like, yeah, that worked for her, but like, I'm stuck. How do I get unstuck? Like, what would you say to them, women who are in your similar shoes, or just dealing with any kind of trauma, because all trauma is trauma, and
Yes.
like how to get unstuck from it?
Yeah, so I did lots of journaling. I mean, just tons of journaling. I journal a lot. And all
Mm-hmm.
in my journaling, it is about working through where I am and just figuring out how to. I knew that I didn't want to be angry. I knew that
Mm-hmm.
being in tune with your body and understanding how your body feels when you have that thing happen to you and it hits you in the stomach, or you have that thing that's recurring happening to you and it's in your shoulders or in your jaw. I mean, mine was
Mm-hmm.
all in my jaw. I would just clench my teeth and not wanting to feel that and like, okay, how do I get through this? This doesn't feel good. And so I would write about what I'm feeling in my body, what I'm feeling in my soul, what the experience was, and now how do I release that? Like this, why it doesn't serve me. Like asking yourself, why
Mm-hmm.
does this not serve me? What about this is unhealthy? And I
Mm-hmm.
wrote a lot. I really did. I mean, the memoir coming out in November. So I mean, I
Oh,
wrote a lot,
yay.
just trying to really work through those feelings because I could tell that my body felt unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also resonate with that as well. Holding things in your body and not taking the time to acknowledge them. So a pastor recommended a book to me called The Garden Within with Dr. Angela Phillips, I think her last name is. And she talks about that. And a lot of what she talks about is how our emotions and our feelings are not disconnected from the reality that we live. And we have to stop telling ourselves, especially as women, that I just have to get over this and move on. And I just have to, stop being emotional about it and just press on with life. And she's like, no, you actually need to recognize what you are feeling and identify where you feel it in your body. And that was the first time that I had heard that outside of like reading about meditations and things like that. So she brings it from a biblical and a Christian perspective, and she tries to tie it into how sometimes in church we're told that you just need to pray it away. And she's like, you can't pray everything away. You have to sit in the trauma. You have to identify where you feel it in your body, and then you have to figure out how to release it. So hearing you say a lot of the words that I'm just now reading for myself, going through my own trauma, it makes a lot of sense to me. But for women who may not have read that book, or this doesn't make sense to them, it's not an easy process. I will not say it's easy, but it's a very doable process.
So important.
Yes, if you find someone, a therapist, 100% recommend that, or find the books that can give you the instruction that you need for these times to be able to do the things that you're saying. It's so ironic. It's not ironic. It's God. Like everything that you're saying are things that I'm learning now, and this in my healing process. So I'm like, oh my God, I just read that, or oh my God, I did that 2 weeks ago, or oh yes, I've been doing that for the last 4 months, because I am also journaling, and that is so healing for me, and being able to get it out.
Yes.
And I don't think we realize how important it is to get it out, like
Yes.
just
Yeah. The
out of
trauma
your
is it
body.
living in your body. That is the
Oh,
trauma.
yes.
Yeah, when
Oh,
I talk
yes.
to my clients about trauma, and like two people could be in the same car accident, and one person could get in the car and drive the next day, and the other person could be afraid to drive for 6 months. And it's all about how they experience that and how one person
Hmm.
released that trauma and the other person is still sitting somewhere in their body, and they're unable to release it. And so that process of really sitting through your trauma and understanding where it lives in you and finding a way to release it is like that. That's our savior. That's how we get through.
Hmm. Yes. Next question I have for you is, were there any specific, oh, actually, you just answered this. So this was, were there any specific strategies, resources, or support systems that helped you navigate difficult times? And I know you talked about the strategy that you use. We talked about releasing. Was there any support systems that you had? Because I know I talk about support systems on my other podcast for women.
Yeah, so I some friendships definitely like talking to other women is really important. But what I found is that we don't talk enough as women, just as people in general. We just
Mm-hmm.
aren't vulnerable. We want to show the sunny side, the good stuff. We want people to think everything is rosy. And so that's been part of my experience too. When you were like, hey, do you want to talk? Like, absolutely, because we don't normalize struggle. We don't
Mm-hmm.
normalize trauma. We don't normalize all of the things that happen that we go through. And so talking to other people and hearing other people say, yes, I've been through that and I'm okay. You're going to be okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
so important to hear because it makes you feel othered, you feel different, you feel why me, but there is no other and different. It happens to everyone. No one has a perfect life. And so really getting out and hearing other people's stories and then being able to share your own, it takes some of that sting off of it too. It takes the stigma, the shame, the the grief, the loss, all of those things start to lift when you start to be in communion with other people and understand that you're not alone. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
talking to people, that was a huge thing for me.
And how would you suggest introverts do that, being an introvert?
Having one or two people. So definitely having one or two people. And as an introvert, like the thing that we love is deep connection to one or two people. It's that
Mm-hmm.
small talk that is the thing. Like I don't understand it at all. I'm not going to sit in a room full of people and just meet a bunch of people. But the one-on-one deep connection, when you feel it, like those are those places that you need to continue to go and really need to grow. And we need to court our friends the same way that we court, like we get courted by a man, or when you're interested in a guy, you've got to do the same thing with your friendships. And so that's keeping connection. That's saying, like, I'm proud of you. That's saying, I love you to other women. Like, we just don't think of our friendships in a way that can help us heal. And they are a place where we can heal.
Mm. So thank you for that nugget because I mean, I have friends now in my 40s, and I had friends before, but I would say my statement would always be I don't have friends. I don't go hang out. I don't have people I hang out with. I don't have friends. So to hear that you have to court or, treat your friends like you would someone that you're dating is a new concept to me, but it makes sense because how do you then build the intimacy within the friendship if you're not spending that one-on-one time or that small group time together?
And
And
showing up, you got to show up.
yeah, for each other. And then you don't realize how much it fills you up when you have that time with those people. And so I stopped saying that because a lot of times we say things and we start manifesting those things that we say. So I stopped saying that. And then now I do have a couple of close friends that I hang out with. And I do tell them I love them and I enjoy my time with them. And we are a little bit more intentional because I think as women, as moms, as wives, we're like, oh, we're so busy. I have work. I have to go home and cook. I've got to clean for the kids. I got to pick up somebody from football practice. And we just don't take that time. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I didn't think about the courting part, but I did start to realize how important my friendships were.
Yeah. Yeah, they are everything. They really are everything. And you don't have to see them all the time. You can see them like once a year, once every 6 months. That's okay as long as that connection is there and as long as you're showing up when each other needs each other. It's that
Mm-hmm.
showing up and taking up space in someone's life that's really important.
It's kind of reminds me of when you see an old friend that you haven't seen in like 5 or 10 years, and then you pick right up from where you
Yeah,
left off, and you're like, "Oh, it feels like no time has passed,"
yeah.
and it was five
Because that
years.
connection is there. It's that you have that soul connection, that heart connection is there.
Next question: what lessons have you learned from your experiences that you want to share?
Definitely that nothing I've been through is different from anything anyone else has been through. And so, like, that shame of something happens and I don't want anyone to know. Getting over that,
Mm,
realizing, no, there are other people who have been through the same thing. And not only have they been through it, but they're going to be there to support you as you go through it. That's a lesson that I had to learn is like not hiding from the things that I've been through, but saying, like, this is me, this is what I've been through. How do we connect? Um,
mm, mm,
that's been really important. Trying to think of other lessons. Um, Vulnerability, I think that's the same. It's kind of along the same vein. It's just the vulnerability just is everything in life. And we're taught to not. We're taught to, we
yeah.
don't talk about those things outside. Don't
Mm-hmm.
share that with other people. But those are the things that, again, live in your body in the same way that trauma does. And shame lives in your body in that same way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've learned over the years to kind of be more vulnerable and not feel the need to hide. taking up space. Yeah. And the last one I heard, I can't remember what it was in a training or something, but someone said, don't defend yourself, define yourself. And that just stuck with me.
Oh.
When I'm in a situation and I feel like I'm being attacked or like I need to prove something, stopping and not defending myself and not feeling like I need to be in that defensive mode, but instead just who am I and how do I show up in this space? Just define who I am and show up vulnerably, authentically in that space in the way that I want to show up and not in the way that the feeling is making me show up.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's hard for us to do, because I feel like just within the last 5 years, I started to live authentically. And before it was how I thought other people wanted me to show up in the space. And that's challenging by itself because everybody expects something different from you when you walk into a space. So you can't meet everyone's expectations. And so I think that's important. The vulnerability piece is hard too. Like all your lessons are women are like, oh, Dr. Abby, are really vulnerability, shame? Come on now. Like,
Yeah.
like we truly walk in those spaces and it's hard, but I think it becomes easier after trauma. And I know women are probably listening like, what? But I didn't start to speak out until after the trauma.
Yeah.
Before the trauma, I didn't say anything. And that's how it happened to begin with, because I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And now that this thing has happened and now I'm speaking up and I'm not afraid anymore, I think it comes with age. I think it comes with experience. I think it comes with its own level of traumas. And I appreciate what you're saying about being vulnerable, about identifying, about relationships and connections. Like all of it is resonating, obviously, because I'm still in it.
And we go through
But
the cycle. You're in it, you're out of it, you're in it again. Like it doesn't end.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so how can women who are in it, coming out of it, about to go into it,
Yeah.
like how can we learn from these experiences of other women? Because you do feel like, why me? And I feel like I'm the only one going through this. But, you know, the age that I'm at now, and then also the life that I've lived, like I know I'm not the only one. Like I'm not naive enough to think that I'm just the only one that has experienced this. But I have to find the people who know or who have been through. And I think this podcast is my way of like finding my tribe of women who have either experiencing it, or who may potentially experience it, so that you can be helped by the women on here, to include myself, because I'm not exempt. Like I'm getting healing through this process. But definitely, like you said earlier, I want to reach as many other women as I can to either help you lessen the blow, because the blow is still coming,
Yes.
or help you get through whatever you're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that it happens over and over again. These traumas just happen over and over again. There's nothing we can do to stop them from coming, but we can build kind of that support system. We can build just within ourselves the strength to know that we can get through it. Like that's really important. But those traumas come. They just come professionally, academically, personally. They just come.
Yeah, they do. And sometimes back to back.
Yes, most of the time back to back. I think the hardest time of my life was when I had a professional trauma that followed with a personal trauma in my relationship, and then a personal trauma within my family with my kids. And it was like back to back to back within a couple of years. And like and actually that happened twice in my life, once as a teenager and then once as an adult. Like, how do you get through that when it feels like everything is falling apart and the only thing you have left is you? It really is sitting in it and saying, like, the only thing I have left is me. Now, how am I going to do that? Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to find the strength to be better than how I was when I went into this thing?
Yeah, yeah. That's powerful. How has overcoming these challenges impacted other people around you? And then in turn, when you've realized how it's impacted someone else's life, how has that then in turn impacted yours?
So It's definitely, I'm trying to think of like how to put it in a way that doesn't sound crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So when I have overcome things, I can see how me getting stronger has a ripple effect on my friends and my kids and
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with my husband. It's holding other people accountable to how they treat me. I change what I
Mm-hmm.
expect from people. I change how I relate to people and even how I treat them, because I've had something horrible happen to me, and I want to make sure that I'm not the perpetrator of that on anyone else. And so
Yeah.
it changes all of my relationships. I think that's part of the reinvent. When I talked about the reflect, release, and then reinvent, I reinvented who I was in all the spaces that I showed up. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you teach someone how to treat you, then they treat you differently, and you can see them change how they treat you and even how they are accountable themselves. I've seen that with my
Mm-hmm.
kids. I've definitely seen that in the trauma, post trauma with my husband in my relationship. And as he sees me respect myself more and put up more boundaries in our relationship and our
Mm-hmm.
conversation, he then has been different and better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that talking about the traumas that I've been through with the people who are closest to me also gives them a different sense of responsibility in our relationship as well. And so that has changed. And that empowers me to do more growth. Seeing that ripple effect empowers me to want to be better, because I see
Mm-hmm.
that when I get stronger, everyone around me gets stronger as well. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work though, and it's hard. Um, Sometimes people push back when they see different boundaries that you're putting up. Like, you have
Yeah.
people in your life who will push back. Sometimes you lose people when you change, and that's hard too. But
Mm-hmm.
it's part of that growth process.
Yeah. I'm reflecting, listening, and I just talked about boundaries, I think about a week ago on my other podcast, and your boundaries and your support systems, and with your support systems, telling them how you want to be supported instead of making assumptions on how making assumptions that they know how to support you.
Yeah.
And letting people know when you're setting up your boundaries of like, I don't like this, I do want to do this, or here's something that I used to accept that I'm no longer accepting anymore. Like, people have to know where you are in order for them to treat you the way that you deserve to be treated and you want to be treated. And I didn't understand that before until now. And well, I mean, I understood it enough to know that I didn't allow some people to talk to me crazy. I want to be clear, because I did allow other people to talk to me crazy. But now that I'm in a very different space, I'm very clear. I'm not going to do that. I am not going to take that down. I still love you, but I'm not going to go to that place. Well, you used to go to that place, but I'm not going to that place anymore. And having to communicate that to people. But I think we just make assumptions that people know what we want and when we want it and how we want it. And that's not the reality. And I think the other part that's difficult to this is communicating that to other people, because we don't communicate. Like you said, we don't connect, we don't communicate, we don't let people know where we are. And so then people don't know how to connect with us or be our support, or people don't know where our boundaries lie because we weren't clear. And so how could you help us in creating boundaries and then being clear on how we communicate those?
So creating boundaries is just about what I will and will not accept, and having that bottom line to say that this is who I am and this is how I want to be treated. Oftentimes, I tell, especially my clients, that boundaries don't necessarily have to be communicated to other people. You have to observe them. And so I'll give an
Mm-hmm.
example. With my mom, she passed recently, so I can talk about this. But with my mom, there were parts of my life that I did not let her in. She didn't understand me as a Black woman, and so I didn't speak to her about those kinds of things because she
Mm-hmm.
just wouldn't understand. I never had to say, or never felt like I should say, I'm not sharing this with you, because that's hurtful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so some of those boundaries you just put up on your own. They don't necessarily have to be communicated to other people, but you have to understand where they are and you have to protect them. But when you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis in professional life, I had a boundary in when I was a principal. I told the charter network organizer, like, I will not ever, I don't ever want to do elementary school. Like, this is not me. I middle school and high school only. And so when they decided to ask me to do to do elementary school, and I quit, their response was, how could you do that? We thought you were a team player. And I said, no, I told you my boundary. I told you that this is what I was going to do. But what was really important in that was that I followed through. Like, that was the bottom line. So recognizing and understanding your bottom line and making that, like, don't push past it. Don't move your line. Don't say except a little bit, because what people will start to understand is if they can push you to the edge of your boundary and beyond, that they can do it. You have to, for yourself, communicate that boundary and say, this is where I will not go, and stand by that no matter what. That's like one of the things I tell founders all the time is know your bottom line, who you're going to accept money from, who you're going to hire, who you're going to, like, work with, and stick with that bottom line, because people will push those boundaries so hard, no matter what you do. And you've got to teach people how to treat you. I'm not even sure if I answered the question, but yeah.
You did. And so is this something that women should be journaling? So, like, I should be writing this down and being really clear with myself first, before I can communicate or not communicate, right? What my boundary is to other people. So I actually need to sit down with myself in a quiet place, figure out, like, who do I want to be as a woman, and when am I going to tolerate or not tolerate, and then be really clear. So that way, whether it's something that's non-communicated or something that's communicated, that's how I'm clear. Because I think sometimes we think, and I wanted to state that because I think sometimes, myself included, we think that, oh, I think I know what my boundary is. And then you get out there and you're like, why did I accept that? That wasn't okay. And it was because I wasn't clear with myself first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we have to make sure we know exactly what it is, because when it comes to the pressure of that, it's easy to fold if you don't know exactly where you stand. And you look back and you're like, when did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah, so easily.
Yeah, it's that easy. It really is that easy. And so it has to be almost like your mission, your personal mission statement. Like, this is who I am as a person. This is what I will and will not accept. Like, it has to be just part of who you are.
Yeah. And you can start anytime. Like, I thought I had clear boundaries, and I clearly did not. Yes. And so now here I am after the trauma, and I'm now identifying what my clear boundaries are, and I'm becoming this woman that I've always wanted to become. Didn't want to get there through trauma, but here we are, and I can still get there. So I think I want women to understand that you can start anytime, anywhere. We can't go back and fix the past, but we can reinvent the future, like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What advice would you give to other women who may be facing, it says similar struggles, but like any struggle? Because I think we think that the struggle needs to be similar in order for the advice that you give to work. But what I'm recognizing and realizing now is that someone's trauma is still trauma. Yeah. And trauma therapy and advice and healing kind of follows the same path. And I think some people may need something a little bit different along the way, but you still need healing. You still need help. You still need a support system. Some of those things are very basic. So what advice would you give women who are struggling?
So sitting in that and sitting in it with someone, don't, if you're in the middle of the struggle, don't sit in it by yourself. Do not isolate. Find a safe space, a safe person that you can talk to. And that may be a therapist, that may be a mentor, that may be a relative or a best friend, but really making sure that you're not doing this alone. I think that's when that's when the darkness, like when you're sitting in that space alone and isolating, it becomes a really dark space. So really getting help and talking to someone and talking through your feelings. Also spending some of that time journaling and talking through. I love to journal from listening to podcasts or reading. And when I have a question or something resonates, I just write it down in my journal and come back to it later and kind of respond to that thing. And so like that was how the don't defend yourself, define yourself came. I heard someone say it, I wrote it down, and then went back later and sort of journaled about what that meant to me, and it just became something that really meant a lot to me. So really taking time to feel and listen and hear and see how your body reacts to the things that you're hearing in podcasts, in conversations with therapists, in conversations with mentors, and then spending that time to reflect on it afterward in that personal space. But also a lot of grace. We don't give ourselves grace. We blame ourselves for things that happen. We blame ourselves like, how could I do that? How could I let this happen? How could I be so blind? How could I? How could I? How could I? And the system was meant to do that. Like this whatever the system is, whether that's within your family system, whether that's in your professional system, it was set up to do that thing that happened to you. It's not that you let that thing happen. There was something that was stacked against us, just because there often is. And so allowing yourself grace to say, not how did I let this happen to me, but like, how do I look out for this thing next time so that I can really stand up for myself and support myself, or get the support that I need? How do I help myself not go through it next time, as opposed to how did I let it happen? Because how did I let it happen is not helpful at all, because it's already happened. How do I just protect myself next time? How do I have people around me who are going to protect me next time? Those are the questions that we should ask. Yeah.
Oh, those are great questions. And yes, because I think the former is us going backwards, right? But then the reflective pieces of going forward are like, how do I heal to go forward? How do I make this better? Not how do I go backwards?
Yeah.
So I have a question in the chat that kind of goes back to the vulnerability piece that we talked about. And it says, is it wrong that I believe not everyone deserves others' vulnerability? Is that just my ego, or is that rational?
Completely rational. I think I said something later about finding a safe space. Not everyone deserves all of you. Absolutely 100%. But there are safe spaces where you can share all of you. And so I definitely share a lot of my vulnerability because I have made myself a safe space, if that makes any sense. Like I'm a person who doesn't easily get offended at this point. It wasn't that earlier in my career and in my life. I can share myself and my life very vulnerably now because I'm confident in who I am, and I'm here to help. But that's not always the space we're in. When we're in trauma, not everyone deserves to be part of that conversation. Not everyone gets to hear your story. It's only when you can share that story and get the feedback or get the responses and still be okay. And that's always in our point of life. So making sure that there is a safe space for you. And that's defined however you define it.
Okay. I hope she's still listening and heard that response. And then another lady said, she said something about, and I think this is when we were talking earlier, isn't that a part of enforcing self-value? How do we, because I am also really owning that now in this healing process, how do we begin to own and really our self-value and our self-worth through this process? Because sometimes, and I'll speak for myself, my trauma was brought on, well, not brought on, but a part of leading up to the trauma was that I did not believe in myself the way that I should have. And so I allowed people to do things and say things that if they would have done them and said them now, I would have definitely not defended myself, but defined myself in making sure that I made a clear stance of where I stood. But before I did not, because I suffered with imposter syndrome and I just thought I wasn't even worthy to be in this place, even though I worked really hard to be there. I'm glad she brought this up because self-value ties into a lot of the things that we're talking about. And then can you talk through how we can build that up through our healing process?
Yeah, absolutely. So imposter syndrome is real. We all have gone through it, will go through it at some point. One of the things that I ask myself often when I start to notice that I'm doubting myself is like, if not me, then who? Why not me? Like, why not me? And I can never give an answer that would negate what I'm doing or where I am. I can't, no matter how hard I search, I can't. So if you were thinking about you and starting the school and why not you, like if there's no why not you, you're the right person at the right place. And you can always find the positives to answer that question. And it's rare to find the negatives. When I finished my PhD, I tell people all the time, like literally for about 3 months, I was checking my mailbox to see a letter or my email to see a letter saying, haha, just kidding, you forgot this course. You didn't really do
Oh,
this thing.
wow.
So that imposter syndrome was real. And at some point I was just like, I did this thing. They wouldn't have given it to me if I hadn't. Tell me why I shouldn't be here. And I couldn't think of the reasons of why not. And so that's one of the things is I asked myself is like, if not me, then who? I should be doing this work, and why not me? And just ask yourself those questions and find the positives, find the why, find the whys, to negate those why nots.
That's great. And I would also suggest, ladies, to as you're defining like who you are, define like your why. Why do you want to become this woman? Why do you want to do these things? Are they aligned with your values and what you're really your goals, your values and your goals? Like, do they align? And I know you guys go to workshops and you go to seminars and you go to these empowerment, women's empowerment workshops, and you're like setting goals and you're vision boarding. But are you really sitting to think about, like, who do I want to become? What do I want to become? What do I want to do? What are my values? Because a lot of times I think we think we know what our values are. And then we allow people to disrespect us. And then you say, I value respect. And I'm like, no, you don't, because you just allow them to disrespect you. And so, like, really getting clear on what they are. And I would say what would be helpful is, because what's helpful to me is now that I have these girlfriends and these friends, is asking them to hold me accountable to what I say my values are. And let's sit down and maybe instead of having a vision board session or party, let's sit down and let's write out what our values are, or let's write out like what our goal and our mission is for our lives, or what type of woman we want to become, because then the vision board makes sense once I know these things. And so again, I'm sharing them because I'm just learning them. And it's not something that I didn't know in my 20s. I didn't even know in my 30s. And so now here I am over 40, and I'm learning how to be a woman. And so I'm definitely like you in the sense of like, I don't want women to continue to walk through life thinking that they're doing well and we're telling people we're doing well, but on the inside, we're not doing well.
And part of that too, all the things that you said, is also understanding who you are. Because when I was a leader, there were other leaders around me who were louder and bigger personalities. And so understanding that I am going to be a quiet kind of transformational leader, and understanding that there's a space for that, and that's important as well, was really important for me, is to identify who I am and how I can show up in that space and do things differently, and not compare what I do to how what anyone else does, because there just is no comparison. I'm not going to be that person. So figuring out who I want to be, and then how I can do that with what I have, the skills, the talents, the personality, like how I can do what I have, is really, really important too. We don't want to change ourselves. We just want to figure out how we can best do that thing.
How would you encourage a woman to learn how to be authentic? Like, what does it mean to be authentic? I do for me, but it took me some time to figure out like what that was. Like, how do you teach that to people?
Yeah, it's a lot of reflection, definitely a lot of reflection, and understanding how your story makes you who you are. Because being authentic is living through your experiences, it's living through all of the things that make you you, and you can't do that unless you know all of the things that make you you, and you really think how your education brought you to who you are, how your structure brought you to who you are, how like everything that you've done in life brought you to that place and what you value. I used to think like I would be happy if I made X amount of money. And then as I started to really think about my values, I realized I value my time a lot more than money. And so that doesn't make any sense. Why am I judging myself on how much money I'm making when really I want to be in control of my time? And that changed, that shifted everything I did. It shifted the way I lived my life. It shifted the way I did work. And I figured that out by like remembering that when I'm the happiest, and when I was the happiest as a kid, is when I was experiencing things, whether it was vacations or a class or whatever it was the experience that I loved more than anything else. And so really understanding those core values is so important to living that authentic life, because you can't live authentically if you don't know what you want or who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to add on to that, the older you are, women, I would say, 30s, 40s, that begins to make sense. And so
Yes.
you can go back and think about the experiences of your life and tie those to, or begin to create your values based on, your life experience. And as I think about the statement that you made about, like, I want to make a certain amount of money, and I want to make a certain amount of money to be able to have the freedom to do the things that I want to do, not because I want to make that amount of money for any other reason. It really is for the freedom of, I love being a mom and I want to be there. And all of my kids are athletes. And so I want to go to high school games. And when they graduate and go to college, I want to go to college games. I want to be in a position where I am in control of my time too, but I know that now in my older age, and I don't think I would have chose that as a 20-year-old. I didn't have kids in my 20s, but as a 20-year-old, I wouldn't have chosen that. And so just knowing where you are and taking that life experience and where you are, and then not being afraid to change it too, right? And
Yes,
so like in
absolutely.
different phases of your life, in my 20s, I didn't have kids and that wouldn't have been a core value. But in my 30s and now my 40s, that is a core value now for me. And those are things that are important to me. So your values don't have to be mine. If you're over 40 and you have kids and you don't want to spend time with your kids like that, like, don't feel bad about that. That's your experience, that's your life. You do what you want to do and become the person that you want to become. Don't become me. And I don't want to become Dr. Abby. Like, that's, I think, the piece that we're talking about with authenticity is figuring out what's right for you because it's right for you and it makes you happy. And I know that happy can be a very subjective word, but I think it's a great word to use because at the end of the day, who doesn't want to be happy?
Yes.
Everybody wants to be happy, and so figuring out how to get to that place of happy, I think, is our number one priority.
And I think 40s is kind of that magic time. And I
It
think in 40s,
is.
we learn the power of no as well. Like,
Yes.
no is my favorite. I just don't want to. I don't have to tell you why. I don't have to give you a reason. Just no.
Yep.
And at
Yep.
40, you can ask for what you need because you put that responsibility on someone else to say no. So if I ask
Yeah.
you for what I need and you say no, then that's fine. But I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
not ask you because I'm afraid of putting too much on you or worrying. No, that's your responsibility if I to
Mm-hmm.
say no. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't learn that until my 40s. And that was so freeing. Just so freeing.
Very
To be
much
able to say
so.
no myself, but also to not feel guilty to need something from someone else and ask them for it.
Yes, yes. And I often find myself telling women, if I tell you that I'm going to do something, I'm not just saying it because I think
Yes.
sometimes there are a lot of people in the world who say, "Oh, girl, you need help, just call me," or "Oh, you need a babysitter, just call me," or "Girl, I'll pray for you," and then they don't pray for me. Like, we get so conditioned to, like, "Oh, I heard her say that, she doesn't mean it," and I have to tell people, if I say that I am here to help you, I mean it.
Yes.
So do not get 2 months down the line and you needed something and you didn't call me because you were like, "Oh, I didn't want to burden you." No, I said, because if I didn't mean it, I wouldn't have said it.
Absolutely.
And so, like, we shouldn't have to do all of that, but I understand why I have to do that because we're conditioned now for people to just be like, "Oh, girl, I'll pray for you."
Yeah. Well, and as women, we're also conditioned to be people pleasers. And so you say yes, even when you don't, like things are screaming in you that you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to. And so having that experience in
Mm-hmm.
my 20s and in my 30s where I said yes, but I didn't really mean it. Yeah, it's freeing in 40. That's all. That's all. It's something about, all
I
right,
love
no,
that.
no.
I do love that. Freeing 40s. Yes. Yes. I am learning all of these things in my 40s. And I'm like, and I think who mentions that as well? Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. If you've ever read that book, so weird that I would bring that up. But if you read that book when you're healing, you're going to find a lot of healing in that book. And I know people are like, "What? Think and Grow Rich?" I'm like, yes, because he really talks about mindset. And when you read it and you're not going through anything, you read it a certain way. But when you read it and you've just come through a trauma or you're in a trauma or you're healing, you see so many things that you didn't see the first time you read that book. And he does talk about how the golden years are between your 40s and your 50s,
Mhm.
and how there's just an enlightening in your 40s and your 50s that you just don't have prior to that time. And so
Absolutely.
it's funny
But
that
just
we're
wait.
talking about
Yeah.
this age.
Yeah.
Just need some time, ladies. You just need some time.
Yes. Yeah. My 40s were kind of that like letting go and discovering myself. And now at 53, it's like my life is designed and I've designed everything about it the
Mm,
way that I want it to be, where I live, the things that I'm doing, how I show up for my kids, like all of that
mm-hmm.
is, and how I show up at work or not. I think
Yeah.
that the or not has been a big part. Like work is not very important to me. And so that has been
Hmm.
part of kind of that showing up in a way in my 50s. It's been kind of beautiful, magical.
That's awesome. You look good, girl.
Thank you.
And so then my last question is going to be around resilience. And how do you define resilience? How has it played a role in your journey? And then what advice would you give to the women about being resilient?
So resilience, like one of those dirty words for me, um,
Mm,
because just from having so many traumas and people expecting you to bounce back, that resilience part of it, like, oh, you're resilient, you'll be okay. I had that even growing up as a kid, where people just
mm,
expected me to bounce back. And so for me, when I
mm-hmm,
hear resilience, I get the like thing in the back of my neck because
mm-hmm,
I don't
mm-hmm.
want to have to go through those things to prove I'm strong.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't
I
want to have
agree.
to do that. Like I did not
I
want to
agree.
have to do any of that to prove I'm strong. And so, yeah, that's a hard one for me. Is just to think about resilience because that means you've been through some crap. Like that's
Mm-hmm,
that's what it means.
mm-hmm.
But it shows when you're strong when you go through those things. It does definitely. Resilience is it's a skill. Um, I think just like the car accident, people can go through traumas and come out of them differently. And it's how you
Mm-hmm.
are able to heal, how you're able to process. That is your resilience. Um, it is just being able to still see the beauty and the good in a world where there's so much ugly. And especially when ugly has
Mm-hmm.
happened to you, that resilience is that thing where you can still see beauty in the deepest,
Yeah.
darkest, most hurtful place you've been. And still
Mm-hmm.
reaching for it too, not only being able to see it, but being able to like, I still want that. That to me is kind of resilience. And I hate that I'm
Mm-hmm.
resilient. I hate
Yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
resilient because
Mm-hmm.
that means I've been to those super, super dark places and still had to find the good. I
Yeah.
talked early about my birth mother not wanting to meet me. She sent me a
Mm-hmm.
letter where she said, like, I never wanted to have you. I don't want anything to do with you. Now you've told everyone that you're alive and ruined my secret. And so being in that place, that was hard. It was really dark. And I gave her
Mm-hmm.
3 days. One day because she had me when she didn't have to. One day because she had my brother who was pretty cool. And then one day just because it was really, really hard. And so that was kind of my resilience strategy was to give myself those 3 days to kind of sit in that dark place and then not
Mm-hmm.
let her have any more of that negative emotion. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of been my philosophy when dealing with with things and traumas and people who hurt you is not letting them have any more emotion than you're willing to give. Like I was only willing to
Yeah.
give her 3 days and then that resilience kicks in and I have to find the beauty again.
Mm-hmm. I think that's beautiful. It's hard, but it's beautiful.
So
And but what you also did that I don't think people may have caught is that you gave it a time frame. You said she gets 3 days and then I'm moving on. And I did that, I say by accident, like mine wasn't really intentional. I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to think about these people anymore. I don't want to be at home talking about this for the next 10 years.
yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to give myself until X. And when X day comes, like, yes, there might be things that pop up that I still do, but this is not going to be this consuming fire in me anymore that makes me angry or sad or upset or depressed. I just, like you said earlier, I don't want to be that woman. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be those things. I want to be the kind, loving, generous woman that I know that I am and that I want to be. And I want to continue to be her for other people, despite the small percentage of people that have harmed me. So,
Yes. Yeah.
um,
You're choosing you over them.
Yeah. Which is also tough, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to sit, you want to sit in that
Yes.
anger and that in the pity and the oh, woe was me.
And you want them to
Um,
hurt and all of the things.
yep,
And at some point,
yep,
you have to be like, nope, I'm choosing me over them.
yep,
I'm so
yeah.
much more important than they are.
Yeah. But I think the beautiful part of the definition of resilience is not that you've been through hard things, but that you're choosing you.
Yes. Agreed. But it sucks that
Um,
you have to be through the hard things.
true.
Sucks so
That we
bad.
don't get to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. Let me make sure there aren't any other questions. There's a beautiful statement that says, no is a full and complete sentence.
Absolutely. By itself. Put
All
that in
by itself.
perspective.
That's that part right there. I appreciate your time today. Now you know you still hold a very special place in my heart, and I think about you often. And I know I don't reach out, and I'm not good with connecting, and I should be better. But you are definitely somebody that has helped me along this journey and the start of the journey. And I have remembered you every moment. And it has been super helpful because I think that I was a really good leader because of some of the advice that you gave me that I didn't even know was coming, but I knew was coming once I had that conversation with you. And so I think that made me a strong leader in some aspects. And then, of course, imposter syndrome and some other things kick in. But work ethic is still work ethic. And I still think I did an amazing job. And I thank you for being a part of my journey and sharing your story of resilience with all the women who watched and who will watch this because it'll be on YouTube. So thank you so much for your time. I really do
Absolutely.
appreciate you.
Do know that I'm so proud of you. Like, so proud of you. I talk about you all the time in my coaching work and tell people to like go see some of the things you've done. And I am so very proud of all that you've done and who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. And so we're going to close out. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We really appreciate you. And tune in next week for our next episode. And I think next week we have Justina Gonzalez and Lupita Gutierrez. So we will see them next week. All right. Thank you, Dr. Abby. Have a great
Yeah.
evening.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.